Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. I'm your host Ajay Vasisht with The Weekender on Sunday. Centre stage in New Zealand this last week have been the ouster and departure of Immigration Minister Ian Lees-Galloway and the Honourable Kris Faafoi's appointment to that same role. In New Zealand, probably the biggest concern has been the escapees from isolation. Another 5 went walkabout, but were brought back in quick smart. Well done to those who did the job. 5 million Kiwis sacrificed so much to become COVID-free and get the economy and society going again. Guys, do you not realize how fortunate we are here? The world is imploding with COVID-19 while things are so good here we can afford to be almost oblivious to it in Aotearoa. Right? But we can't afford returnees to be so lax about it. Don't want another wave now, do we? We don't. India, on the other hand, has seen a sharp rise in the number of coronavirus cases, with the total climbing to nearly 1.34 million, up from a fortnight back when I was with you last, when it was around 821,000. It is the third highest caseload in the world, behind USA with 4 million and Brazil with nearly 2 million. Actually, probably heading towards 2.25 million now, as of this weekend. And there have been ongoing concerns and complaints in India about a lack of both testing and frontline medical staff. So, as the caseload starts now, in New Zealand, the story is entirely different. Confirmed cases 1556, recovered 1497, there have been 22 casualties, and current cases in New Zealand just sits at 21. Moving on into our head-to-head series, today our guest is the Honourable Kris Faafoi, who was elected as the Member of Parliament for Mana in November 2010, following more than a decade working as a journalist at both TVNZ and the BBC. He is the Minister for Broadcasting, Communications and Digital Media, Government Digital Services, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, as well as the Associate Housing Minister for Public Housing. Plus, he is now the newly minted Immigration Minister. He is also the Labour candidate for Mana electorate. Now, as per Chris's Beehive page, he states, as Associate Housing Minister for Public Housing, Kris recognizes the opportunity he had growing up in a state house. And he will continue to work the government had started because he wants every New Zealander to have a warm, dry home. Welcome to the show, Minister. How are you doing?
Good, Ajay. Thank you very much for having me on.
You're welcome.
Very good.
It's our pleasure. Congratulations, of course, also on wearing that uneasy crown called immigration.
Yes, well, as you said, newly minted Ajay, we're still getting I'm still getting my head around it, but it's a privilege, obviously.
Thank you very much. I think it's going to be a bumpy ride. You should be getting ready for it. So let's just start today's talk with those humble beginnings. How was that journey from the state housing to becoming an associate housing minister, and of course now as the Minister for Immigration?
Oh, look, it's pretty surreal, Ajay. I think if I think back to my childhood, I think one of the things that growing up in a state house gave to my family is just putting down foundations in the community, being able to grow up with families and friends around us that weren't moving around too much, and again a loving community. And I'm very lucky enough to have parents that really made sure that we were part of the community and that education was important. I'm not a Rhodes Scholar by any means, but I think those foundations gave me the opportunity to be where I am now. So that's why, that simple thing of having that responsibility for being able to ensure that, there are enough homes, but they're warm, safe and dry, and regardless of how much you earn, you can live in a good community and go to good quality schools is really important for me. So, as I say, huge privilege. It's a challenge, given the housing challenge in front of us at the moment, but we're pretty proud of what we've been able to do in 3 short years.
So, did you also start with a course in journalism to get into the media at the outset?
Yeah, look, I had some friends who went through the New Zealand Broadcasting School down in Christchurch ahead of me. I grew up, born and bred down there, so I was smarting from the rugby result last night a little bit.
Yes.
But I went to the New Zealand Broadcasting School down in Christchurch and really loved it. And it really opened up a new world for me for being able to, ask questions of people in positions of power, but also opportunities personally for me as well, which I've really enjoyed. And that ability to get stories and information out to communities has always been important.
Yes.
But I think certainly in the last 3 or 4 months, with the challenge that we've had with COVID and keeping New Zealanders informed about being part of the team of 5 million has been really important too.
And of course, you're now on the other side of that divide. You're getting asked the questions instead. So,
Yes.
with one of your portfolios being, sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, but I don't mind that challenge either.
You don't mind that either. That's right. It's a Kiwi can-do attitude. Now, in your portfolio to do with the broadcasting side of things, just recently you guys announced that thousands of Kiwi jobs and investment will be made in the New Zealand productions and sector, in the screen production sector, through a screen sector support package. On the broadcasting front, what assistance and plans do you think are afoot that would put the ethnic communities more in front to be able to tell their stories, so we can see a bit more of the ethnic communities on cameras telling their stories?
Yeah, there's always traditionally been support through New Zealand On Air, obviously. But we would like to see more of that happen, which is why recently we were able to get some more money for New Zealand On Air for the likes of community access broadcasters who are in the mix and speaking to a whole lot of diverse communities as well. But I think what we've also spoken about is, in terms of further help, is that I think we're struggling to get niche news, the likes of local news, news for particular communities. And when we announced our first media package, it seems like some years ago, but it was probably only 3 months ago now, we certainly gave a message that we'd like to look at that, and we're continuing to look at that. But it's, I think, whether it be for the Indian community, whether it be for a Pacific Island community, there are lots of different communities that don't necessarily get their needs met through mainstream media, and would like to know, A, what's going on in their land, their homeland, where they've come from, but also what's going on in their communities here in New Zealand. So that's where those community access broadcasters are important. Channels and radio stations like yours, who are now kind of making use of more technology to do more of this kind of thing, are important in the future. And I do think it is about journalism and being able to ask questions that is important too. Notifying people of what's going on is obviously pretty important, but I think also that the pushing and prodding to make sure that whatever is happening is best for a particular community is important. So hopefully we'll have some more news on that soon.
So that's really good news. I mean, that's heartening for people on this side of the divide, as it were. We would love to see more Indian stories. I'm sure the Pacific Island community would like to see more of theirs. Years ago, we used to have something called Asia Down Under, and that was covering pretty much all the communities, all the ethnic communities. But nobody got enough time, as it were. And now these communities have all grown. You probably know the numbers as well. Yeah. More than 200,000 or 250,000 in Indian Chinese PI communities. And I think the representation is still lacking a little bit. Also, there isn't a lot of training for people. So the right kind of talent doesn't come forward because there's no way that they can actually get trained up. Yeah, look,
I think two things there. First thing I think is in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen the ability for either radio stations or communities to make more use of different types of platforms. So back in the day when Tangata Pacifica or Asia Down Under or Marae, for all these different types of communities, were on television, it's pretty hard to get any time on television unless it was Sunday morning. But now those those airwaves are a lot more different now that the internet is here. So getting that content to people is much easier. But that does bring it, as you say, with it challenges of being able to use the technology to get out to those communities. Some of it is pretty easy to use. Some of it is not, and I by no means would be an expert in using some of the technology. But certainly in amongst having journalists there to represent and give news to some of those distinct communities is going to have to be training. No one does radio alone these days. You know that. We're doing that now. So being able to work a radio desk and also a camera is really important. So that again is some of those things that we think hopefully will make the news more accessible to those different communities, whether it's just someone who wants to get their news on the West Coast or the likes of the Indian community that you're serving right now.
So I think that's a good portent for the communities. We just have to keep at it. And like you went through different stages, ended up on the BBC at one point. Now, we might be able to, within our small communities, to grow it to that kind of level as well at some point. So that'll be good to see what can happen. And it's always good to get some support from the government.
And look, as I say, the technology is becoming more available and cheaper these days. So again, I think that's good for our communities that might not have the size to muscle their way onto the TV1 platform every weekend.
Well, this is a fine example of that. I mean, you're far more accessible than having to fly you in or we fly to you, so to speak.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on the immigration front, there's a lot of concern among our community, particularly with people who are missing out on being able to return as temporary migrants and a whole heap of other issues. And I know you're going to have this issue of not being able to address everything because you're less than 7 days in the job, really. But what do you think are going to be your top priorities as immigration minister, given the 2 months you've got or less before we hit elections?
Yeah. Well, Ajay, the absolute priority at the moment is making sure that we've got the settings in terms of the border right to keep New Zealand safe. I think your opening remarks were absolutely bang on. Our biggest tool to keep us all safe and to ensure that our economy, which feels normal at the moment, as normal as it can be, I should say, is the border. But there are some complications that come about from that. Obviously, New Zealand citizens and residents can come back in, but making sure that those who have to come back for some other reason is managed, both on a humanitarian ground, but also if they're critical workers is extremely important. So that was a challenge for my predecessor. It remains a challenge for me, and it means a hell of a lot of engagement, whether it be for particular cultural communities.
Mm-hmm.
Might have their own set of cultural norms which mean that people want to be back in New Zealand, or they might want to go back to their homeland. But also importantly about keeping in touch with sectors in the economy who believe they have skill shortages. And that's really a difficult balance at the moment because, as I say,
that's interesting you bring that up. There have been concerns among some employers where they want their regular workers, some people on farms, some in factories, some in offices, blue collar as well as white collar jobs, where they want their temporary workers back, but there is absolutely no provision for that in the current policy. There was something I wanted to bring up with you. Is there something the government is likely to do in that area? That's one of the biggest areas of concern.
But obviously the safety of the country is important. So not so long ago, my predecessor started up a new exception around critical workers. There are some criteria in and around that. Essentially, the people who are coming in have to be critical to a sector, not necessarily critical to a particular business. And if the criteria are met, which is essentially that there's no one else in New Zealand that could do that job, an employer has extinguished
what sectors have you highlighted in there at the moment?
Look, I think certainly in amongst all the exemptions that are there, health workers are one that we looked at pretty closely. But it is really on a basis of each sector making a case. I've been obviously you can imagine in the few short days that I've been the Minister of Immigration, been contacted by the likes of the dairy industry, by the horticulture industry. Look, our message to them is we know it's difficult because some of those sectors have traditionally heavily relied on migrant labour, but with the border closed to the extent that it is, they really have to make sure that they're being innovative and trying to make sure that they can find some of that labour capacity from those that are already here and New Zealanders. And if not, then they really do have to make a good case and meet that criteria and apply for a critical worker exception. So the bar is set high.
That's a very difficult tightrope for you, Minister, because People like Winston Peters, even the ACT Party chief there, they have said, look, these are low-paying jobs, low status, usually not on the list of jobs that Kiwis actually want to do. I recall Bill English actually said that much back at the last election when he was still on the campaign trail. And those are jobs that Kiwis don't particularly want to do. So why don't we just open the doors for those who are available for them, and they're stuck, they had visas before this whole thing happened. Why don't we allow them in? It takes care of their families. At the same time, it gives us much needed labor to handle the jobs that are not being handled by Kiwis.
Yeah, I think those are all valid questions, but the most important thing for me at the moment, with the global pandemic nearly everywhere, bar a handful of countries, we are one of the lucky few who don't have any cases of COVID in our wider community, and any reappearance of COVID and community transmission will put us at risk of going back into level 4 lockdown. No one in New Zealand wants that. We don't want that to happen to our community. So yes, it is a tightrope about making sure we can have the right skills and people coming in if they're absolutely critical, but also having some of those conversations with those sectors to say, okay, you've relied on migrant workers in the past. We're going to have to help you to find some of this labour. And in the long term, working with the likes of the dairy industry, who I think now realise the challenge in front of them, to say that they're going to have to start working with the government, with their training organisations, to get people who are already in the country trained up to do some of the jobs that they've relied on migrant workers on for some time.
So there's a very interesting thing happening on our Facebook as part of the interview. There's a bunch of people, of course, the people who are looking for those visas to be reinstated or for them to have some kind of a status to be able to come back. But employers also talking about the fact that they need their people. They're willing to actually pay for getting the isolation through their pockets. You know, they don't mind as long as they're able to kind of give some certainty to their families as well, because their families and whānau are also in jeopardy as a result of not having a job where they are and their current job not being accessible when they are in New Zealand or where they should be in New Zealand. So isn't there some kind of a midway path we can find? And also, what kind of a timeline would you put for that safety, where we don't breach the safety for the COVID-19, but we're still able to help these people in need and the employers?
Look, let's start with a timeline. That's always a challenge when the rest of the world, we see numbers of coronavirus increasing and second waves hitting. We've got to be extremely careful that our measures at the border are the most stringent as they possibly can be. We've already moved in a number of areas in terms of extensions of visas for people who are already in New Zealand. And it really is keeping watch of what the situation is here in New Zealand, depending on the time of year and seasonality of whatever the sector is. But increasingly importantly, when we're watching what's happening overseas, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, in India we're seeing numbers increase. In America we're seeing numbers increase. Across the Tasman we're seeing numbers increase. We do have a challenge about trying to meet our skills gap in right here and now, and in the immediate future as well. But it's one of those situations where we're going to have to do as best as we can with the labour supply that we've got at the moment. It might mean some New Zealanders who have traditionally not been able to want to do the kind of work that some of those sectors have relied on, getting themselves into that sector. And I would also add that some of those sectors haven't been able to attract New Zealanders to do some of that work because of the wages that they've been offering to people as well. So it is a very delicate...
That's really crystal ball stuff, because we don't know they're interested. They haven't been traditionally. Of course, if they're out of jobs by the time elections roll around, then there'll be mayhem otherwise. So 3 months, 6 months before we open it for the temporary visa holders or families who have been ripped asunder?
Look, I think we're constantly watching. Again, it really does depend on a whole number of factors. Pretty much some of them out of our control and what's happening out of the country, outside the country. But as I say, we are constantly engaging with its ethnic communities or a particular sector.
Is that a goal you would like to have as Minister of Immigration? Because we've had a very shambolic, shall we say, course over the last 3 years with the current minister gone. Is that something you would like to see, streamline it a bit more, and maybe reboot that whole immigration department a bit?
Look, if you look at the simple maths of what is happening now, the amount of visa processing that usually would happen in a peacetime, as I would call it, has obviously headed south dramatically. It gives us an opportunity to look at a whole lot of things about how visa processing happens in New Zealand, what those visa processing volumes and nature might be in the future. But again, some of the officials have said this decreased demand has given us the ability to look at how we do things in the future. So I think one of the biggest concerns from the communities have been the amount of time that it takes to turn around applications, for example. So the officials are looking at this from a whole number of angles because one of the opportunities that COVID has given us is that all the offshore and onshore visa processing centres, if they are going to be reworked, can potentially do that because of what has happened. I'm not going to start venturing into what that may look like. But there is an opportunity in this challenge to think about how we do things in the future to make sure that it's more efficient, not just for the government and the economy, but for those who are also applying as well.
So keeping that in mind, I agree with you. There's this long spans, 6 to 9 months, 12 months. In case of parent cases, it goes into years, 2, 3, 4, 5 years sometimes, with really high thresholds for them to have jobs that they have to get paid $150,000, $200,000 in. We'll get to that in a minute. But is there any help at all for the immigration department in the COVID-19 framework? Is there being money allocated to put more resources to get their offices going better in areas where they're being shut down or they are not able to function properly, especially with the COVID-19 challenge? Has the government earmarked any extra funding and resources for the immigration department?
Well, there has been, I believe there was some in this year's budget in order to, I guess, account for some of the new challenges that the Immigration New Zealand faces. And a lot of that is work that they would have never thought they would have to do in the past.
Yes.
But the kind of liaison that needs to happen so the flows of people into the country and through managed isolation quarantine is where we need new resource. So there are a whole lot of things that a whole lot of government agencies thought they would never have to do, which were approved either in Budget 2020 or in some of the COVID-related response funding that was announced about a month ago. So the answer is yes. And, again, wider system in terms of our border, there's opportunities to look at how the likes of immigration, customs, etc., can work better in the future. And I think, again, there's an opportunity in this challenge, which I think might see a better experience for those who are offshore and want to come to New Zealand, not just in terms of arriving here in New Zealand and going through our border, but also when they arrive, having a much better landing in New Zealand as well.
Right. So, thank you, Kris. I'm going to make an assumption. If you're back in government after the September election, that you'd be taking on a much more proactive stance to improve things. Would you say that the 52nd Labour, 52nd Parliament, the Labour government in power right now, is seen as a compassionate one, right?
Challenges 15 and obviously COVID, which have been real shows of the mettle of a government. Now, one of the main things that a government does is manage the economy, and I think Grant Robertson has done an extremely.
There seems to be a gap in messaging there. Even we're seen as a kinder, gentler government that's helped stave off COVID-19 really well, and they have done an amazing job with that. Even the messaging asks New Zealanders to be kind, stay safe. But why can't we extend that to these people who are actually, within inverted commas, they are Kiwis too. Some of them have been here for 10 years. I have a couple here writing from, I actually don't know where. Their names start with they're sort of Spanish-sounding names. Diego. Hi, Diego, if you're watching, by the way. And his kids, and they've been working here 10 years, and they just can't make it back. And his boss is wanting him back, and we don't seem to have any possibility. Isn't there a way, given that New Zealand is such a a compassionate place. Plus, we are quick off the mark with most things. We are efficient. We can't get this right.
Look, there are a small and limited number of means to be able to get back into the country.
Yes. How many people, Chris, would you say are on these temporary lists, according to the bureaucrats who came to tell you about the situation in your briefing once they joined you this week?
I wouldn't have that number. Off the top of my head, I think there's about 16,500. I'll have to check that number. But
Right.
Another number that we've got is that 26,500 New Zealanders, people from outside of New Zealand have applied for an exemption to come into New Zealand. Now, there's no way that we'd be able to deal with that number of people coming into New Zealand in the short term through 2 weeks of managed isolation in order to meet that demand. Anyone in New Zealand during the lockdown understands the huge sacrifice that we made, and we do not want
with that on that one, definitely.
So
on the assumption, Chris, we're going to get you back after September. On the assumption, we don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, and that you might actually still be in the immigration portfolio. From an Indian community perspective, do you know anything about the issue of arranged marriages that's been plaguing the department? I'm just plotting it in there in case you're still there after September. This is something that needs to be looked at.
Yes, look, I know a little bit. As you may know, up until about June last year, I was the Associate Minister of Immigration. Yes. So while I wasn't responsible for policy, I did have some decision-making responsibility for cases like this. So I'm acutely aware of some of the challenges that the Indian community has with the likes of arranged marriages and other cultural marriages as well. They are obviously tricky. But I think in the future, and I think in the last 3 years, the previous minister and the government has tried to address some of those issues. Yeah. It may not necessarily be completely to the fulfillment of those communities themselves, yes. But whether it be decision making through the Associate Minister of Immigration's office.
I'm going to share something with you, Chris, because I've met with some of the people who are on these delays where the wife might be out of the borders or the husband might be, permanent applications get delayed. Probably the biggest concern is instead of being an arranged marriage, in INZ's eyes, they are seen as an arrangement marriage. They look at it with a view of, oh, look, they're guilty until proven otherwise. They must be doing something dodgy in the background. And it puts all the genuine people into this horrible quagmire of constant waiting, costs, being away from their families, being away from newlyweds, and perhaps it's something you could do if you're there in this portfolio in the new government in again 2020 September. We don't know, but I think that's the biggest concern. It's never looked at as being genuine first.
Yeah, look, I think one thing that is pretty important in life to have, and I think some government agencies are learning this as they go, is to have some cultural literacy, understanding where other communities come from and their practices and their cultures. And while they might not necessarily seem the norm yes. To the department or the agency transacting an issue, it certainly might be for those who are applying. So, as I say, I think they've tried to do better in that respect over the last 3 years. There may be a different opinion for the interviewer in that, but certainly from what I've seen from decision making in the past, there has been a genuine attempt by Immigration New Zealand to get the information that they need to ensure, and this doesn't matter whether it's an Indian application or something from the Pacific Islands or someone from Europe, they've got to make sure that every application that comes through is bona fide. And I'm
going to agree with you. I think it's just a mindset thing. The few bad apples make all the others look really bad.
Yeah, and that's where the cultural literacy thing comes in, understanding how other cultures work.
Yes, and I think just while we're having an open conversation about this, the parent category has got several issues as well. I think the income threshold for me, if I wanted to bring in my parents from overseas, I don't have to, just by the by. I'd have to be on 156K a year, or if I want to bring both my parents on about 212K a year. Who makes that kind of money in New Zealand apart from politicians?
Look, again, from my time, I saw a lot of parent category applications come through that didn't meet the mark in terms of the criteria set down in the instructions. There is the ability in a number of cases to seek a ministerial decision around those things, and if they're on compassionate grounds, then sometimes they can be accepted. But again, it's about managing the overall number of people that can come into New Zealand and setting a line in the sand where we think that is. There are a whole lot of factors that go into deciding parent category applications, income threshold, the ability for them to be able to come here and support themselves. And again, the settings are where they're at for a reason, in order to, I think, certainly for the parent category to manage the overall number of people who are coming in as well.
So I'm going to be a little bit blatant. You've been very kind, actually, given that you've only been in 7 days or less. You've been very kind trying to address all this. We've probably got, I'm asking my producer while we are sitting here, would there be several hundred or several thousand people on the Facebook discussion wall right now? Several hundred. So those could be your voters. And they're all looking for some way to get past their problems with their own whānau, and it would be good if we can help them out.
Yeah, look, and there are traditional ways that have always been there in order for them to do. Obviously, there's immigration advisors, lawyers, or friends can help them, but their local members of parliament are also an excellent way to be able to ask initial questions and try and get assistance for people who are having trouble in an immigration sense. And again, that's one of the fundamental jobs of a parliamentarian to do that. So I know it's always tricky for people who are having immigration issues to figure out where the best place to go is. But certainly in an electorate like mine, where we've got a pretty good ethnic diversity, people usually try to path for their local MP, and it's election time, so if you want them to get their vote, then they should work for you too.
So can we actually just, so I know that I don't want this to be just a case of why, or when, but is there a likelihood that that visas that are delayed and stuck right now, they may be fast-tracked, and maybe it could happen prior to the September election, and those who are going to actually come off the visa come September, is there some certainty for them? Are you going to just extend those visas?
I don't think I can give them any concrete certainty at the moment, other than to say we're watching that situation extremely closely. I think you should watch our actions so far in a number of visa categories where we have been able to extend some visas beyond that we're going to expire this side of New Year's, another 6 months. It is a fluid situation. We're aware of the humanitarian difficulties with people being able to support themselves, and there is assistance for some of those communities. But it is about making sure we keep our border settings in the right place. We can manage the labour challenges within the population that we've got here now.
Sorry, Kris, I'm interrupting you, but you've actually been on the other side of that divide as well. You tried to help a friend of yours out with an immigration issue as well last year. I think it's a gentleman from OpShop. And that caused you a little bit of disruption to your situation. But, you were doing exactly what the rest of the people were doing. I mean, would you mind maybe just sharing with us what it was like for you being whānau in that situation?
Well, he wasn't. He's not family. He's a family friend and will continue to be so.
Right.
And again, I did exactly what I'm asking others to do, and that people should go to their local member of parliament and seek assistance. Members of parliament do have the privilege of being able to go straight to the Associate Minister of Immigration for assistance in that case, and that has always been the case. And whether or not people know the right place to go to for immigration assistance is one of the first and fundamental issues that certainly people that I've met in the community have. My family friend didn't know where to go to, so I sent him to his local member of parliament. And if there's anyone who's watching or listening to this who has got some questions or frustrations with Immigration New Zealand in the process, I suggest go to the phone book or the internet and figure out who their local MP is and start the process there.
I have an idea. I've got. I mean, I can't show you all of this, but we'll put a list together and we'll send it to your office, and your office can guide them which local MPs they can talk to. Yes.
Parliament.nz.
Yes.
You'll find your local MP. Their officers are all well versed in immigration cases.
Yes.
Again, MPs can put in ministerials straight to the Minister of Immigration, and
Yes.
they are dealt with.
But it'll
because
be a lot better if it's coming from your office in terms of saying, look, these people have approached me. You're within the gambit or within the ambit of your portfolio. You don't have to physically do anything. You're not breaking the law. You're not breaking ministerial procedures. But you can at least say, look, these are people who have been highlighted. And I know INZ will do their usual thing of doing it on a case-by-case basis. But at least to them, it seems like they're getting heard. Right now, they're just posting away on our Facebook page and Twitter and everywhere else, and they have nowhere to turn to.
Let me go back to the fundamentals. I know they're probably all listening to get an idea of where things are heading. And as I say, overall things are tricky because we're in a tricky situation. But if they have genuine concerns for friends or family, then the best place they can go to is their Member of Parliament, or they may have already engaged a licensed immigration advisor or a lawyer themselves. But Members of Parliament are free, and that's their job, and they will listen. And if they believe they've got a genuine case, then they will bring it to the Minister of Immigration. The reality is, a lot of people that do go to to MPs' offices, the MPs have to say, look, I'm sorry, I don't think that your situation is going to be able to be changed. So that's why I think if people are listening, if they've got time to tap away on social media, then they also type up an email to their local MP to start the process if they genuinely feel that they've got an issue around immigration that they want dealt with.
Even if they were living in, say, Mount Eden, but they're overseas right now, they can write to their local MP. In this case, it'll be somebody from ACT, but...
but doesn't matter who it is. Yeah, look, the answer is yes. If they've had some form of visa already, or they're outside New Zealand but have some connection to New Zealand, then again, it's working with their connections here in New Zealand to petition their local Member of Parliament. I really do think, in an immigration sense, Members of Parliament are underutilised avenue for people who have got issues. Start there, and usually the MP's offices can point you in the right direction. There are, of course, though, let's be really honest about this, there are criteria and instructions for immigration in New Zealand already.
Yes.
So, and they are the criteria and settings as they are now.
Yes. So I'm going to actually just repeat what you said. The word is out there. If you want to reach out to your local MP, wherever you lived, if you're not in the country, and wherever you were living now, but unable to get some clarity, approach a local MP. And being election time, they are going to be very open to talking to you. Not that they are not usually, they usually are. I think New Zealand has a very good track record for being very approachable in terms of our governance. But definitely reach out to your MPs, right, Kris?
Absolutely. And look, a plug for every MP's offices. It doesn't matter which party that they come from. They're all staffed by really professional and knowledgeable people. So they will, if they can't help you out directly, they will point you in the right direction.
Okay. So look, I'm going to kind of summarize this. You'd like to do a lot, but you don't know what you can do and when you can do it by. And you really got the perfect foil in COVID-19 in some ways. But I think beyond that, we probably should be still looking at a way to fast track some of this because it's affecting far too many people. And it's a bit like, you know, we all have family. When your friend or family member was in need, you wanted to help them out. And really, we're all in this together. The kinder, be safe, be kind, compassionate government. So I'm just making a case for them. And sorry.
Yep. Look, there's no playbook for this. We, in terms of the immigration, we'll be as responsive as we can. We want to make keep us safe and get our economy pumping again, and take the opportunity that goes. The compassion side of it is going to be increasingly important. But let's be honest, COVID has forced some difficult decisions down the down the pipeline for the government, and
Yes.
we're absolutely committed to making sure that we keep people safe, but getting our economy up and running again as well.
So towards the end, I mean, we were not going to get those kind of answers. We kind of had a feeling about that because it's just too hard for most of the people in positions of power right now. In terms of your current anointment into this immigration minister role, do you think you want some changes to happen under your watch? And if yes, do you see yourself as a night watchman in cricketing terms? You know, somebody who's just come to make sure they can protect the bigger hitters? Or do you see yourself as somebody that's going to be there next morning when you start to play the next innings?
Supposed to protect, not necessarily. I would have exposed the middle order, but look, the immigration portfolio is huge and has some really good policy challenges. So, if we've got the privilege of coming back, it's certainly a portfolio that I'm interested in. That's the pleasure of the Prime Minister. What changes do I want to make sure we bring in?
Yes.
I want some good, sensible changes that keep us safe in the current context and set New Zealand up in the future to take the opportunities, especially the economic opportunities, and getting those immigration settings right is extremely important. That pattern and that picture is only emerging, but our country is not going to be the same country as it is in 5 years' time that it was at the beginning of this year. And one of the absolutely crucial levers to pull in that sense is immigration. So getting those settings right to make sure that New Zealanders have got jobs, that we're bringing in skills and keeping our country diverse.
Yes.
That's how my family was able to come to New Zealand, is extremely important to us. I think over the next 3 years of the next government, whoever that is, and I'm working every day to make sure that it continues to be us. I do think that the Labour Party does have the kinds of compassion and the pragmatism to make sure we can
be. You're going to show it to these migrants as well, Kris.
As I say, we can't. In this situation that we're in now, it's hard to be able to keep everyone happy.
Sure.
Because the situation is fluid. And
assuming you guys are back in power, do you see yourself back in the same role post September?
Look, I'm not going to preempt a decision that the Prime Minister makes.
Especially with Winston going for a little play for that portfolio as well. You know, that was his opening salvo in the campaigning. He said, if you want me back and you want the support arrangements, you better give me the portfolio, the immigration portfolio.
Let's just see what happens on September 19 before we all get a bit excited about who has which portfolios. We're in the beginning of a campaign to make sure we get every vote for Labour that we possibly can. In order for our party to exact some of its policies, and fundamentally behind that is ensuring that we have a diverse community and a compassionate community. And if I were to continue as the Minister of Immigration post-election, if that were the decision of the Prime Minister, would be exacting that, and making sure that people can support themselves if they're here in New Zealand is extremely important part of that. Whether or not the external factors will allow us to reflect that in the future is still a moot point.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, he's kind of giving you the warning. Watch out! I'm coming after it. And he knows how to get his constituents all rocked up and everything. So you might have a bit of a fight in the hands come September.
We usually tend to take a different approach.
Yes. So back in February, we're just kind of trying to round this off now. Back in February, you announced that you will contest your Mana seat as a list MP. Is that still going to be the case?
Yep. So I'm hoping to be replaced by a lovely lady who's local here by the name of Barbara Edmonds. Mm-hmm. So she is the candidate here in Mana this year. So if people don't know the electorate, we're in North Wellington, so it takes in all of the city of Porirua and the southern end of the Kapiti Coast. I've been the MP here now for close to 10 years and absolutely loved it, but I do think there's an opportunity again here for us and the Labour team to rejuvenate the team and get somebody in. So I'm I'm really looking forward to having a new colleague as the Member of Parliament for Malahia. It's been a huge privilege to sit here in the seat.
Yes.
Mid-innings, make use of a big hitter that could also come in, and that's what Barbara will be.
Certainly. And plus, if you stick around and you come back to talk to us, you're going to be handling that amazingly large crown, the immigration crown. So, you'll have enough on your plate.
Well, there's enough on the plate at the moment. As you said at the outset, it's still early days.
Yes.
But I would like to come back as a Member of Parliament. I've still got some unfinished business to do, certainly in terms of the broadcasting and communications portfolio. That I would like to see through in order for, again, our communities to be able to tell some of those stories.
Definitely. And so in parting, I want to thank you very much for your time, but I still want you to go clang that bell on behalf of all the constituents that not only are in your, within inverted commas, vote bank, but there are also people who are on a human level suffering. And given your humble beginnings, I think you have the right credentials for taking it back to the higher ups and letting them know that this is a festering and important problem. And we would look forward to being able to see that you were able to make a difference.
Ajay, look, thank you for highlighting it. It's good that you've got the ability to be that voice for them. We certainly are listening, and it might not necessarily happen in a media interview, but if there are issues that you want to let us know of that are coming through from your community because there is some anguish and frustration there, then we've always had an open door policy.
I'm quite willing to send you a temple bell that you can clang in Parliament.
Okay,
just as a reminder.
We'll keep an eye on the in tray.
Depends on how big I'm going to find one now. No, but it's a serious matter, and I think anything that highlights it, anything that reminds you that it needs to be highlighted, is a bonus and a benefit. And once again, thank you very much for joining us, Kris Faafoi, the Honourable Kris Faafoi. This has been the Weekender on Sunday. One more time, thank you, and we hope to see you one more time, or at least once before the election comes around, and get a sense of being able to talk to you. Namaste from us. Namaste, Sat Sri Akal, Kia ora, and salam from us as well. Thank you. So, that was Kris Faafoi in that newly minted role of him being the Immigration Minister. He has come in the back of somebody that, in our view, or in our community's view, had failed miserably while he was focusing on other portfolios, for want of a better phrase. But first, before we go, to get a sense of what just transpired, and we can have a discussion about it with our editor, Sandeep Singh, a word from our sponsor, who are Business Launchpad Chartered Accountants. They can assist business owners with new business setups, annual accounting and tax compliance, business plans, cash flows and forecasts, IRD tax problems, property tax matters, accounting tax and business services under one roof. All of that can be had under one roof. If you're struggling to pay your taxes or are in trouble with the IRD, you need to contact Business Launchpad CAs. They can negotiate with the IRD and provide you with options suitable to your needs, which will help you to save interest and penalties charged by the IRD. And not to mention, take all that stress and tension away from you, from your head, from your shoulders. If you want to contact them on 09 520 1515 or visit their website on bizlaunchpad.co.nz. The phone number once again is 09 520 1515, bizlaunchpad.co.nz. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sandeep Singh into the show. Sandeep ji, are you ready and available?
Hi Ajay, very good evening to you. How are you today?
I'm doing well, slightly frustrated by the lack of clarity or any kind of decision making we want from the Immigration Department for thousands of our community members. What do you think of Mr. Faafoi's responses to our challenges and to the challenges our community is facing?
Well, surely not satisfied, not very happy about that. Regardless of him coming across as a good gentleman, probably there was nothing else in the interview. To be very upfront with you, Ajay, I'm sorry about that. What I'm seeing here is that Minister Faafoi has taken over or was handed in the baton from the former immigration minister.
Yes.
And minister so far has just taken the baton and he's just started running. And when we say running, basically he has started spinning out the same narrative that we have been hearing for
Yes.
last 4 months, that it's just the New Zealanders who have paid the price to keep New Zealand safe during this COVID-19 environment.
Yes.
I would say rather it's now becoming a little bit disrespectful towards all those temporary migrants, because we are not hearing anyone from government acknowledging their contribution, their pain, the price that they are paying. And the entire conversation that we heard today is an exact follow-up, or I would say continuation of what former immigration minister used to say,
Yes.
that New Zealanders have paid a huge price, we don't have capacity. And one of the most interesting thing I am trying to find, that Minister Faafoi has so far not been able to understand clearly that COVID-19 impact on immigration is not the only thing that this department has been facing. He
Yes.
needs to understand that immigration portfolio was through gross incompetence and inefficiency in last 2.5 or maybe 3 years.
Yes.
The issues that are plaguing today, they have started to emanate right from the former immigration minister took over the charge, be it the issue of I would say partnership visa delays, skilled migrant category visa delays, and many other heaps of issues. So those two issues were existing much before COVID-19 started.
Yes.
So today, what we are hearing is that all government officials, ministers, they are hiding behind COVID-19 as if that's the only issue.
Yeah, there's nothing
immigration.
new. There's absolutely nothing new to add to the narrative.
Surely. And the thing is that what Minister Faafoi will need to understand, that there are two issues that he needs to understand. A, there were pre-existing failures, inefficiencies in system, and competency issues, visa processing queues, delays in
Yes.
skilled migrant category issues, and then COVID-19 happened. So basically,
Which has exacerbated the situation, actually.
Sure. And then, to be very upfront with you, actually, I'm really very disappointed. Like, minister came over here with his same pitch, same old wine in a new bottle, and he haven't got any assurances for our probably around tens of thousands of temporary migrant workers who are stuck overseas. And they are very disheartened that none of the New Zealand politicians, they are acknowledging the price that they have paid to keep New Zealanders safe.
I don't think the caucus is actually putting any mind towards this right now, or if they are, because it's election, it suits them to point the finger somewhere else. They would rather focus on the electorate, which is happy with the immigration being tight at the time of COVID-19, and the fewer people who are affected by it, even though they are in the thousands, they are not on the top of the list. It's really is, I think it's political football game playing happening right now.
Sure. Like, I would like to contradict that. It's just an assumption that all New Zealanders, they doesn't want immigration.
I know, but I mean, that's what they've been doing since 2017. All the parties made immigration the hot potato and tried to clamp down, and both National and Labour were on the same path, literally. And then they didn't actually do it. Winston's been pulling on their chain by saying, you said you would reduce it, but you didn't.
Well, that's a different story. I would say that today our temporary migrants who are stuck overseas, they
Yes.
are expecting some kind of compassion and empathy. They are expecting some kind of clarity. What
Yes.
is stopping immigration minister to come out and offer
Yes.
them an assurance that they won't lose their visas, the visas for which they have invested thousands
Yes.
and thousands of dollars to come into this country and work? What
Yes.
is stopping this government and the immigration minister to give them an assurance that
Yes.
they will be given, that the temporary migrant workers who are stuck overseas, they will be given a fair and dignified chance to come back and pick up their lives and live with dignity if that the need be. The thing
Yes.
is that what we are hearing from immigration minister, unfortunately the new minister as well, that to be fair to him, I understand that it's not enough time for him, but we still need to see that he has got a better understanding of what the problem is. And from what I heard from him today is that probably he has not been briefed accurately, or he is not aware of the magnitude of the problem.
Yes.
The problem is far deep rooted. It is affecting lives. It is dividing families, and it is affecting livelihoods. It is pushing people in huge debt.
You only
What
have to
they
look
are
at our
not
Facebook
understanding
feed,
that
Sandeep. I would not argue with you on that. It's full of people who are suffering and who are going through a really difficult time. Perhaps there's time to maybe start a petition on their behalf from the
well, there is
editorial desk.
already, there is already petition going on in the parliament with probably around 35,000 signatures. Probably
Yes,
what our
but
viewers
it
are
doesn't
asking.
seem to. उनके कान पे
Yes,
जू नहीं
what,
रेंगती.
yes. So what the thing is that they need to remove the bureaucratic, I
Hurdles.
would say, institutional bottlenecks that is currently plaguing immigration New Zealand. Plus, what we expect from a new minister is to bring a fresh perspective. He should not be buying the line or the narrative that has been imposed or initiated by the previous minister. It is an opportunity to give a reboot to immigration New Zealand. It is
Yes.
an opportunity to bring a fresh perspective. Like, we cannot hide behind the institutional lack of capability of quarantining people, and that's why probably they are not bringing in temporary visa holders.
Very interesting point, Sandeep ji, because you're hardly going to get the same bureaucrats who have caused the bungle to recommend changes to undo their bungle. Because they probably think they're doing okay, or that's a vested interest in terms of their way of doing things. And hardly the bureaucrats are going to make their jobs easier or less needed by suggesting better efficiencies.
Of course. So what is required right now, Ajay, we need a minister who is, I would say, who has got a deep understanding of management and administration, who
Yes.
is able to ask the right questions, who is able to look into the long queues. Right now, probably we have got 14 to 15,000 people who are on temporary who are on temporary work visas currently on shore, and they have filed application for permanent residency. Usually,
And
2 years.
that number from in an election year could easily be 80,000, because everybody has family and members and people who are related to them. There are extended whānau, and it's not just me that's affected. It's going to be people who are related to me. It could be my uncles and aunts and mothers and fathers, and so they may be underestimating this problem by just thinking it's a few thousand. It could multiply, and it could actually impact them at the election as well.
Surely. So the thing is that if we have got 15 to 20,000 people waiting in that skilled migrant category visas who have put
Yes.
their application for around 2 years ago, they
Yes.
need to be given a clarity. They deserve better than this. You cannot hide behind all your bureaucratic explanations and expect those temporary migrant workers to live here on a temporary basis for years and years.
Yes.
And when suddenly they see some dramatic situation like what we have seen, the global health pandemic of COVID-19, New Zealand government, it's sorry to say that, they have washed their hands from tens of thousands of temporary migrant workers who were caught on the wrong side of the border.
Well, my hope was that because we had a new minister, there would be some kind of एक बत्ती जगती है ना जैसे कि भैया हाँ कुछ फर्क करना है. But I think within the caucus and within the framework of how that caucus is working and what their bureaucrats are advising them with, there seems to be absolutely no either no idea on how to fix it or no desire to fix it.
आइडिया और डिजायर बिल्कुल सही बात है, और कैपेबिलिटी का भी बात है यहाँ पर कि जो नए मिनिस्टर आए हैं सबसे पहले उनसे ये एक्सपेक्ट किया जाता है कि वो
तजुर्बा है,
डिवाइड करें, वो चीजों को अंडरस्टैंड करें कि भाई क्या हमारी जो इमिग्रेशन डिपार्टमेंट है, ब्यूरोक्रेसी है, वो सही तरीके से काम कर रही है क्या.
चलिए आप और हम ये बीड़ा उठाते हैं उनको बताने के लिए.
बिल्कुल नहीं, इंडियन वीकेंडर is always constantly on top of the issue. We keep on writing, we keep on asking the tough questions, either on interview or on editorials, and we will continue to do that. We are committed to our Kiwi Indian community and the wider migrant communities, and we will continue to raise their voice.
Thank you very much, and I think that is what we need in this hour of need. बहुत धन्यवाद संदीप जी आज शो पर फिर आने के लिए. As usual, it's been a pleasure. Bit disappointing, yes, I agree with you. We hope that we will get him back another time, and maybe they will have a little bit more, some better news to share with us and some decisions that they can make prior to election. Thank you once again, Sandeep. और आप सब भी जो हमारे साथ हैं, अगेन हमारी तरफ से तो यही कोशिश रहेगी कि हम आपकी आवाज़ इन गवर्नमेंट के हॉल्स में और इन द कॉरिडोर्स ऑफ पावर पहुंचा सकें, वही हम काम करने के लिए यहाँ पर मुस्तैद हैं। आप सब अपना ख्याल रखें, जहां भी हैं सेफ रहें, स्वस्थ रहें। आई एम योर होस्ट अजय वशिष्ठ विद वीकेंड ऑन संडे। आई विल सी यू नेक्स्ट संडे इन, फॉर नाउ, अभी भी द सेफेस्ट कंट्री दुनिया भर में। Kia ora, salam, namaste, sat sri akal. Till next time. Do follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And remember, if you are on the wrong side of the immigration equation right now, write to your local MP. Go visit him if you're in New Zealand. Reach out, make a noise. Thank you very much, and I'll see you again next Sunday.